Hello and thanks for checking out Mara Makes. My name is Tara and this is a knitting podcast where I talk about my current projects. I'm coming to you from Hamilton, Ontario, which is situated on the traditional unceded territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. I hope you've had a lovely, restful holiday break. I have a number of finished projects to show you today, so I'll do my best to get through them pretty quickly. So I've been sick. I'm all better now, so it's nothing to worry about, but I had to take a long break from both YouTube and my knitting because I was too busy throwing up. I feel really bad because I'd had a knit-along that I wanted to post about, and I also signed up for and completed my very first test knit, but sometimes life gets in the way and no one really anticipates falling ill. So I feel really grateful to finally be better, and I've spent the last few weeks finishing up a few projects, so I will be focusing on my FOs today, and I hope you enjoy. As you can perhaps imagine, I have not been operating at full brain power lately, so I'm actually pretty amazed that I got through all the knitting that I did. I had to rip out so much knitting. I didn't keep track of the sizes I was knitting or the needles I was using. I kept losing needles from my interchangeable set and then finding them like a month or two later. I was cutting corners that should not have been cut. I wasn't counting rows properly, etc., etc. But given all that, I'm really pleased with everything that I did manage to finish, and I think everything turned out really well. My first finished object of the day is the one that I am wearing. It is the POINTELLE tee by Paula Pereira. This garment barely has any projects on Ravelry, which is really shocking to me because I feel like it's such a beautiful top. I knit mine using Knitting for Olive cotton merino, which is a 70% cotton, 30% wool light fingering yarn, and mine was knit in the color Rust. It's a top-down raglan-shaped t-shirt, and I actually don't remember the cast-on method that the pattern calls for, but I just used a standard cast-on. Lately, I really have not been into the tubular cast-on. It's just really annoying when you're using circular needles. I feel like the stitches kind of twist their way around the cable needle. I really wish I just had like some really long DPNs, I guess. I have a few straight needles back from when I started to learn how to knit, but of course that's kind of annoying too because they have that stopper at the end. So I don't know, I need to think about how I want to do tubular cast-ons for the future. Maybe I just need to get over it and deal with my twisted stitches because I used to do it all the time and now I can't stand it. I did use a sewn bind-off or Kitchener bind-off, Italian bind-off. Every video, I'm going to say this. I don't know exactly what it's called, but I just call it a sewn bind-off these days. I used that for the bottom hem, but I really don't like how it looks. I don't know if it's the cotton content or the needle size that I used, but it just doesn't look good. I also wish that for the bottom hem ribbing, I had turned the project inside out so that my neater ribbed stitches would be on the outside rather than the inside. So I think I'm actually going to redo the ribbing at the bottom, and I do have this much yarn left, so I think I might add another inch or two to the body as well. I might as well. I think the length of it is actually pretty good, but if I add another inch or two, it'll just make it that much more wearable, and I could also tuck it in if I wanted to. I knit size 2 for this top, which I'm really grateful for because this is one of the projects where I just made a million mistakes. I couldn't keep track of the needle size that I was using, and I think I kept swapping needles because I was swapping projects all the time. So I'm not actually sure whether or not I used the correct needle size for the body. I'm not sure if I switched needle sizes after I had knit the ribbing, so I don't really know what I did. I also had a little bit of a hard time determining my stitch count for my gauge swatch. I think just because of the stitch pattern, it was a little bit tricky for me to determine whether it was 25 or 26 stitches. In the pattern, it calls for 24, so My size was always going to be a little bit smaller anyway, so I'm really glad I knit size 2. I think it fits great, especially given all my mistakes. So my project is around 35 inches at the bust, which is almost 2 inches narrower than it should be according to the pattern, but I think it all worked out okay. I think it fits my body pretty well. I'm actually not sure why I wanted that much ease to begin with, but again, with all my mistakes, it worked out. The only modification I can recall making is that I did make these sleeves about half the length that they should be. I think the pattern makes them about 5 inches long and mine are about 2.5. And as I often do, once I got to the ribbing, I reversed the direction of my knitting and essentially knit the ribbing inside out, just to make the stitches look a little bit neater. And then for the sleeves, I just did a standard bind off, which I think looks perfectly fine. I actually kind of like the little line that it creates at the bottom of your knitting. I love how it looks, and it was a lot of fun to knit, and I also feel like it's a really versatile top because obviously in the summer I can just wear it as is. It's really lightweight and the eyelets will keep me nice and cool, and then in the colder months I can always wear it under a cardigan. I really love the ribbing and lace look, and like I said, it was a lot of fun to knit. It knit up pretty quickly. Yeah, it was a really satisfying project. My next finished object is one that I had only just started at the time of my last video, and it is the Home Sweater V-neck by Caidree. I feel like I barely remember knitting this, even though it took me a really long time. I was knitting on this for ages, but at the same time, it kind of felt like it flew by. Like, I look at this thing and I can't believe I knit this for some reason. I don't know. But it's finally done and it's so beautiful and it fits me so perfectly, and I'm really, really proud of it because, like I mentioned in the last video, I've never knit a drop shoulder sweater before, and I was really nervous about it because I was really afraid of how the picked up stitches along the sleeves were going to look. So I'll try to show you here if I can without knocking anything over. Oh god, that's so close, I'm sorry. But yeah, as you can see, even though at one point I picked up an extra half stitch there, and you know, that's not the neatest thing in the world, I actually think it turned out really, really well. It doesn't have any weird puckering. There's not like a weird triangle shape that I sometimes see with drop shoulder sweaters. Maybe those ones are knit bottom up, I'm not sure. But yeah, I just feel like everything really worked out with this sweater, and that's very motivating, and I now feel like I can tackle another drop shoulder sweater. I'm really enjoying the way that they look lately. So Caidree's was knit using a DK weight, lightweight alpaca cotton merino blend. It looks really light and airy and beautiful, but I decided to knit mine in a worsted weight, superwash, heavy, bulky, warm, thick yarn. I chose Madelinetosh Tosh Vintage in the color Moorland, and I held it with a silk mohair blend by Isager. I used a long tail cast on and then a sewn bind off. I did hit gauge, but my bust measurement ended up being a little bit smaller, which is strange because I thought that because mine is knit using a superwash that it would grow like crazy, and I had a bit of a scare with it when I had knit only one sleeve. I blocked it because I really wanted to see how long that one sleeve would be before I continued on with the second one. And I think when I tried it on, it must not have been fully dry just yet because that thing grew. I was really afraid. But yeah, like I said, it probably just still had some moisture in there. And once I left it alone a little bit longer and tried it on again, it fit perfectly. So that made me really happy. So I knit the smallest size, which is supposed to give you about a 41.5-inch bust, and mine came out at about 40. So I still have around 8 inches of positive ease for mine. It measures about 47 inches across the top of the shoulders, and the sleeves are 19 inches from the sleeve pickup point down to the cuff. So with that drop shoulder shaping, the sleeves end up being longer than 19 inches. So they are quite oversized, but that's exactly what I wanted, and that's also what's in the pattern. The body measures 14 inches from the underarm to the bottom of the ribbed hem. Despite me using a much thicker yarn and making a fabric that is a lot heavier and bulkier, I feel like it still has like a really pretty drape to it. It doesn't feel too stiff, and it is definitely heavy. It weighs almost 700 grams, so quite heavy, but I feel like it feels really nice. It's sort of like walking around wearing a weighted blanket. It does use 5mm needles for everything, including the ribbing. I can't remember now, but I think it uses a smaller needle for the neck, and I actually picked up fewer stitches for the neck anyway. I didn't intend to. And then I also used a Suzanne Bryan tutorial to figure out how to do the center double decrease down here at the bottom of the V from the opposite side, because as usual, I knit the ribbing inside out, just so that these knit stitches on the outside would be nicer than the ones on the inside. I do have just under 400 yards left of both of the yarns that I used for this, so I'm thinking I may make a matching ribbed fold over brim hat. I think that would be pretty cute. Okay. Unlike the homespun V-neck, my next FO is tiny and light. So this was the test knit that I participated in, and thankfully I was able to sort of go through the process, but I was really hoping that I was going to be able to post about this. Sadly I couldn't, but at least I'm doing it now. So this project is called Sleeve Vibes, and it is by Sachiko Burgin. This project is kind of like knitting a sweater, but without the body. It's just a pair of sleeves that you can wear over something else. I really wanted to sign up for this test knit because I've wanted something that looks just like this in my closet for a really long time. And I'm so glad that I did, because I love this pattern. The only part I was worried about or intimidated by is that it has all of these short rows at the front and center of the pattern. So I felt like if I really screwed them up or made them look super ugly, they would be super visible right across my chest, but I actually feel like they turned out pretty good. My short row game is really not amazing. It's something I definitely need to work on, but I think I did a good job. And the only modification that I made is that I chose not to add the ribbing to the top of the neck here, which I think some people really don't like. They want all of the ribbing everywhere to match, but I really love the look of an unfinished cast on edge. I just think it looks really pretty. I really want to knit another one of these, mainly because I am not pleased with my yarn choice. I wanted to try something new, so I picked up a couple balls of this cotton and mohair blend by Concept by Katia. And it looks really pretty. I love the color, and it's a really neat looking chainette style yarn. And to the touch, it feels pretty soft, but when it's worn next to skin, at least for me, I feel like the mohair is a little bit rough. It's not the softest mohair I've ever felt in my life, and there were definitely, I don't know if they were guard hairs or what, but there were some really dark, really thick, really itchy strands that I had to pull out of the yarn here and there. And it's fine for me to wear, but it's not the softest thing in the world. I think I was really hoping that the mohair would lend a fair bit of softness to the cotton, but I don't know if it did. I feel like the yarn would be good for something with more positive ease, but this is a pretty form-fitting garment, and I also elected to knit the smallest size. So I don't think a cotton mohair blend was the best choice, because in my experience, cotton doesn't really grow all that much, and there is also an issue where sometimes it can have a bias to it, meaning that it twists. So sometimes when I try to wear this, it can be really tight on my arms. I kind of have to squeeze my arms through the sleeves, and then also it can sometimes twist around my arm. So it's definitely not my favorite project of the year, but it's all down to my yarn choice. Again, I'm really excited to knit another one. I really feel like I could get a lot of use out of something like this. I love the idea of layering knits in interesting ways, and I also really like that it's something that can be worn when it's too warm for a full-blown sweater. But like, for instance, if I wanted to wear like a cute little dress, I could always just throw something like this over top. So I'm feeling really motivated to try it again. And I also really like knitting sleeves. At least lately, I feel like they knit up pretty quickly, and I've never really felt as though I've gotten trapped on Sleeve Island. So since I handled the short rows fine and I don't have a problem with sleeves, I also really like a good raglan. And it's also really nice to have smaller projects. I'm super excited to knit this again. I've really been trying to find something in stash that I can use. I don't know if I have anything, but I also got a gift card to a yarn store for Christmas, so that's really exciting. So thank you to Sachiko for letting me take part in the test knit. Sorry, I was a little bit disappointing. Hopefully I will do better with my next test knit. What's next? I wasn't convinced that I would ever finish my next finished object. That's an exaggeration, but yeah, it already took me all year to finish this. And it is the Copenhagen cardigan by PetiteKnit. I am finally done. I think I started this in, January or February, so it has literally taken me all year to finish. I lost a lot of my motivation because, and I did mention this in a previous video, but once I got to the sleeves, I started knitting them and they were a lot darker than the body was, and that was really putting me off, and I wasn't sure whether it was just a matter of blocking, like maybe a lot of dye had bled out, but I finally decided I wasn't going to let that stop me. I really have been wanting a black / a dark gray cardigan to wear. It's super handy for the wardrobe. So I finally hunkered down and I finished knitting these dang sleeves. Oh, I'm gonna start sweating so badly. It isn't as obvious post-blocking as it was, but I still do feel like the colors have changed quite a bit. So yeah, it's a little bit disappointing, but also I know that I'm the only one that's going to notice. It's really not a big deal, and I feel like if the sleeves are a little bit darker than the whole rest of the body, it almost looks like it could be intentional. The only thing I have left to do, I do have one pocket that is not seamed down just yet. The other one has been. It's so cute. And then I also need to decide on the buttons. I have been agonizing over the buttons. Every few months I go on Etsy and try to find something else. I've also bought a few little packets of buttons and I just can't decide what I want to add, but I can still wear this in the meantime. I knit my Copenhagen cardigan using 2 house yarns from the Knitting Loft, which is a yarn store in Toronto. I used the Knitting Loft Boots, which is a superwash fingering weight sock yarn, and also their yarn called Dust, which is their silk mohair blend. Both of them were in the color Carbon. I was expecting them to be a little bit more black, and in fact the wool yarn looked pretty black, but the silk mohair blend was quite gray, but I do really love how they've knit up. The sweater is a pretty standard top-down raglan cardigan. One of my favorite things about it is that the button band is knit while you knit the body, so you don't need to pick up any stitches. And my sweater is so dark that you probably can't really tell, but the ribbing for it is actually quite small. It's maybe like 4, 5, 6 rows of ribbing, something like that, which isn't something I usually do, and I think it looks really pretty. I used a long tail cast on and then just a standard bind off, and I did hit stitch gauge. My row gauge came up a little bit short, but for some reason my bust measurement is about 3 inches shorter than the pattern. So I'm not really sure what happened there. So I only have about 1 inch of positive ease at the bust, but that's fine with me. I actually quite wanted it to be a little bit more fitted, so I guess it worked out somehow. I'm pretty certain that I followed the pattern exactly with no modifications. So it measures about 12 inches from the underarm down to the bottom of the hem, so it's a little bit cropped. And then the sleeves are about 16.5 inches from underarm to the cuff. So I don't think I changed anything, but I'm not 100% sure. And also, obviously, my gauge was a little bit off. It is super lightweight, super soft, super drapey, and I really, really love how fuzzy it is. I don't know if you can see, but oh, it's like the fluffiest thing that I own. It's so cute. It weighs around 330 grams, so it's less than a pound. And for the yarns, I think I have just under 600 yards of both the sock yarn and the silk mohair. So I'm thinking what I might do is make one of those hood accessories where it's sort of like a cowl, but there's a hood as well. I think that would be really handy. I am just blasting through this video today. It's going a little bit too smoothly. I'm suspicious. My last finished object of the day is one that I have also mentioned in the past. I didn't even start it, I don't think, at the time of my last video, but it was for a knit along for UKnit in Toronto. Obviously, I had really hoped to post about it during the knit along before it actually ended. It ended months ago, but one, I ran out of yarn somehow, and two, I got sick. So it wasn't really in the cards, sadly. So once again, I am not going to try to pronounce it in the Spanish way, but this is the Cathedral sweater by Claudia Quintanilla of UKnit. I made mine using Lamana Como, which is a 100% merino wool in a DK weight, held together with Lamana Premia, which is a lace weight silk mohair blend. It is a bottom-up circular yoke sweater, and I used a long tail cast on in a standard bind-off. And my gauge was just a touch tighter than the patterns, but I also knit mine in size 2, so it's not something I was worried about. My sweater measures about 37 inches around the bust, so it's about 3/4 of an inch tighter than it's meant to be, but I still have 5 inches of positive ease at the bust. The only thing that I changed about the sweater is that I did make the sleeves a fair bit longer. Let me measure actually. My sleeves measure 19 inches from the underarm, and the pattern asks you to make them 17 inches. But I really love a long sleeve. I love being able to pull my sleeves over my hands because I'm always very cold, especially at work. I think that's actually my least favorite thing about knitting garments bottom up. The sleeve length is super, super important to me, even more than the body, because if something is a little bit cropped, I don't really mind, but I would really like to be able to have a long sleeve, especially for something as warm as this. So I think because I added a little extra to the sleeves, that's why I ran out of yarn. So I did have to wait a little while until I was able to buy some more yarn to complete the project. And actually that's something I'm really happy about because I had to finish the yoke with 2 completely different balls of yarn. Sorry, 1 in each kind, the Como and the Premia. And I also purchased them from a different store, not from UKnit, because I had to place an order for something else anyway, so I just tacked those on, and you can't tell at all. There is absolutely no difference, even though there is no chance they were part of the same dye lot, so I'm really happy about that. I really wanted to wear this today. It is so warm and so soft, but I knew I would just be sweating my way through the whole video. Honestly, I kind of am right now, even in a t-shirt. So if you want a really warm sweater and you don't want to knit using like a rustic or woolen spun yarn, I would recommend these yarns. They're super, super nice. They're not cheap, but they make for a beautiful, beautiful warm sweater. I feel like it's probably going to pill a fair bit because it is so soft and because it's a little bit of a loose gauge. It's not a tight gauge, I would say, for the yarn, but pilling is worth it for me. I can't remember if I mentioned it in my last video, but one of the reasons that I wanted to knit the sweater using a wool and mohair blend rather than something like, I think it is the Knitting for Olive heavy merino that they recommend for the pattern. I wanted a mohair because I kind of wanted to soften the look of the twisted rib stitches. I used to be such a fangirl for twisted rib. Lately in my life, I'm just not into it. Maybe I just overdid it a long time ago. So I tend to not really use it anymore, but I think it worked perfectly. Like, I just didn't want the twisted rib to cast that much shadow. I know that's a really weird thing to say and get hung up on. I didn't want an incredible amount of stitch definition, so I figured the mohair would help out with that, and I think it did. I think it's really beautiful. So that's all I have for FOs for the last little while. I won't get into any of my whips or stash additions because I have already been prepping for this video all day, and it is my last day of freedom before I go back to work tomorrow, and I have a lot of errands to do. So thank you so much for spending your time with me here today, and I will see you soon.